Hey, everybody, what's up? This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. It's Monday again. Here we go. We got some episodes for you today. This is another two live stream day. We got this one for you here with Michael Wilson and Dr. Myke Merril. We're going to be talking about a couple of different things and their book as well. But this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Get Past Your Shit, the book. Author is Kelly McCausey, and she's actually a friend of mine. If you look down below, you'll see a little bit of information on the ticker tape there. I've read the first chapter of this book, which is Kelly's story. I'm not a big reader. Ever since I got out of prison, I do not like to read anymore. But since I've read 300 books while I was in there, maybe it's PTSD. I don't know. Could be anything. Other than that, our next broadcast will be at 4:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time today, and we will be talking to Dan Reeves, who is the host of the Spiritual Underground podcast, and we'll be talking about alcohol addiction and his story. So let's go ahead and hit the whatchamacallit here, our intro, and when we get back, we'll have Myke and Mike in studio.
Sean Dustin spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. Upon release in 2006, he had nothing but the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and legal paperwork. In 2010, he kicked a long-time methamphetamine habit and started the long climb back up the ladder of life. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. If you want transparency and authenticity, you're in the right place. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and this is Sean Dustin.
Gotta love technology. I hate it when it does that. How you guys doing, man?
Doing well.
So we've got Michael Wilson and we've got Dr. Myke Merril here, and you wrote a book called, and I have it here. Hold on, don't tell me. It is Why Do People Act That Way? And Mike, Dr. Myke, you're the one who wrote this book, right?
I am, and it's got a subtitle, which is extremely important. A second question, and what can I do about it? So why do people act that way is a question on many, many people's lips frequently. And what can I do about it is a great follow-up question. We wrote on both of those questions.
Oh, I would love to know. There's a few different people that act in a way that I just can't stand, and I would love to do something about it, but unfortunately, what I want to do is not legal.
It may be that what you want to do to them isn't possible, but what you do to yourself is possible.
Yeah, true. And you guys both, you do a YouTube channel as well, right? That both of you are involved in, correct?
Right. Called Gripping Reality.
And that YouTube channel is 5020 Communications on YouTube. If you look that up, then you can subscribe there. All of the direct links to everything, the books that they've suggested, all the stuff and all the places that you can find them are available in the description. And if you're going to be listening to this on the podcast platforms, which this will be airing probably in about a month, you will find all that in the show notes as well. So why don't you guys go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourselves? And I know that from what I read, that both of you have been affected by somebody in your family, a loved one that has passed from cancer, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
So that's kind of like the bottom that was described in the questionnaire thing that I sent out there that you both have probably struggled with. And if you want to touch on that, you can. Otherwise, we'll talk about the book and, kind of what you guys are doing. And I have some questions for you, some talking points that I'd like to address as well. So the floor is yours.
I'm the East Coast version of Myke. I spell Myke with a Y. And my buddy on the other coast, Myke Wilson, is with an I. He's the West Coast Myke. I'm the East Coast Myke. And we do a tremendous amount of training, consulting, interviews, live stuff, dead stuff. We work together really well. We've been friends for about 35 years, 36, but who's counting? Myke is. And one of the things that we really emphasize is that Myke, West Coast Myke, is the empathetic one, and I'm just the pathetic one. So
there's a lot of truth to that, but we really want to dive into that today. I mean, we are glad to be here. We actually just finished, we wrapped up, I don't know how many months of work on a course that we're launching with Astero Global. It should be out in mid-June sometime.
We've been working on it since August last year, so it's been a long process. It's a course on called emotional agility, and so we teach across the spectrum on perceptions, how emotions work, how motivations factor into that, what our behaviors are. We get the whole package.
And this is aimed at corporate leadership and actually kind of middle, somewhat corporate leadership on how to be able to navigate and deal with their emotions and facilitating that within the corporate world, which no one wants to talk about. And we're kind of like that. We kind of wade into many things that we probably shouldn't wade into, but we do anyway.
We don't use the word should. Myke just did a violation of one of our core tenets. We do not use the words need, should, ought, or must. And so whenever one of us says one of those forbidden words, the other one will call them on it. And I'm usually the caller and he's the callee.
That's not true, because he really needs to get a life, and I ought to do something about it. And it must be done right now. What can I say?
Sean, take over. You're going to lose it.
Yeah, that's funny, man. You guys are great. So the behavior thing is something that I talk about quite often, just because of my own personal experiences in my past. I had a lot of negative behaviors, a lot of so I was the toxic person in the room. Sure. When I would come into somewhere, or when I was in a relationship, or whatever it was, I had the behaviors that were learned and kind of ingrained over 40 years. And going to prison, that doesn't help anything. It's not designed to help you change any of those behaviors. It's designed to give you a timeout. Now there are exceptions to that rule, and usually the people that are doing 10 long periods, long stints of time tend to change those behaviors because they have nothing else better to, not that they don't have anything else better to do, but they have a long time to think about what they've done. Sure. When you've spent less than 5 years, you're usually going to do a lot of working out, do a lot of, getting your body in shape and looking good that way. But when you come out, that toxic person's still there because you haven't dealt with it. So I'd love to hear more about these behaviors and how you can kind of change them.
One of the ways in which we have analyzed behavior, of course, in human activity, there are trillions of options of how one acts, but we bring that entire question to two pathways. You can engage a behavior or you can disengage a behavior. And that becomes a very critical aspect of, do I act out or do I choose not to act right now? So maybe you think of something to say, it's on the tip of your tongue, but you choose not to say it. That becomes a disengaged behavior. Or if you choose to blurt it out, it's an engaged behavior. We find that in understanding the dynamic of how people see reality and their part in that reality, the question of, do I engage or do I disengage, becomes very insightful as to what's really going on.
And what we want to do and what we do in our training is we actually go way below the surface of all of that, and we look at the dynamic of what goes on for that engaged or disengaged behavior. And so we ask two, which people would say are pretty simplistic questions, but to be blunt about it, many times the simple things are the most profound things. And we ask, so what is something doing to you? And then the second question is, what can you do about it? Now that sounds, well, yeah, but what we do is we've built a whole platform around that to be able to figure out what is your reality, what drives the engaged or disengaged behavior. Because you might understand the behavior, but if you don't know what the substance or where the roots lie within that, how are you going to change that effect? And so
or even address it. How are you going to even address it? Because it might not be something, that you want to change or that you can change, but that's why we call our podcast Gripping Reality. Until a person actually grips, takes hold of, takes ownership for their own reality. It's not somebody else's fault, not somebody else's responsibility. It belongs to the person. If they can grip that, they can begin to deal with it. It might be resolution. It might be starting something new. It might be ending something old. But the issue of gripping it really becomes a critical first step. What does this event do to me? What's it doing to me? If I can grip that, I will be able to deal with it. Now, sometimes an event is so sharp, razor sharp, that people find their emotional fingers getting cut to shreds. They say, I can't grip it. We can teach them how to grip very sharp things that are too hot to handle, stuff that's too heavy, or sometimes too light. It's like fog. How do you get a hold of fog? How do you understand mist? Well, we can teach people how to grip what is too light, too heavy, too hard, too brutal, too far distant in the past. But getting a grip on that reality really is the first step.
Right. Now, what would you do? Let's say, because for myself, and I'm using me as an example because I do. What about like lying for me was so second nature that like before I would even realize I was doing it, it was like, boom, it was already out there.
Right.
And it was like almost an auto response. Now, I have come across people that absolutely are not aware of how they are being, they're not aware of how they act, or at least they act like they don't. And I really do believe that some of them didn't. And so what I found, and when, through my journeys, and I was going and I went to a therapeutic community to go visit. I was actually in one when I was younger, but it was way too young to understand the value of what I had and what I'd gone through. But what I've found to work in calling out behaviors is being able to call them out, because if you're not aware of them and you don't have anybody around you that's telling you about them and saying, hey, look, dude, you're manipulative and you're doing this wrong, or you're doing this, and this is how you're showing up. It's really hard to kind of pinpoint that stuff for yourself unless some really big event happens around that behavior where you have no choice but to look at it.
Kind of core in our book, Why Do People Act That Way, is the concept that there are 5 emotional systems. There's only 5. We have mild versions, moderate versions, and intense versions. But the 5 emotional systems become very, very helpful in addressing something like perpetual lying. Let's just take that one. The 5 emotional systems are, in the easiest terms, love, fear, anger, sadness, and happiness. Those are the 5. And the words that we use, more technical, are acceptance, exposure, empowerment, depletion, and celebration. So let's go back to lying. What is lying in reality? If you're going to get a grip on it, what is lying in reality. So it's taking a truth and saying, I'm going to create an opposite truth. Why would a person do that? To me, at the onset, that's about power. So if it's about power, it's in the area of empowerment. So I'm going to begin exploring anger issues, unresolved matters where a person feels powerless or victimized, and the way in which they're dealing with that level of powerlessness is to create a reality that they actually own because they created it. They're God of the lie. And so now they can do anything they want with that falsehood, that lack of truth. They can manipulate it. They can massage it. They can present it. They can trick others with it. All of those are power plays. So if we're going to deal with lying on the surface, you shouldn't lie. You need to stop lying. That's why we don't use need, should, ought, and must. They're just worthless words. So you say, okay, is the issue really the lying, or is it the need for power that is beneath the lie? And so what I would look at then is that the reality that the person is getting a hold of seems to be challenged with powerlessness, and they want to be empowered, but they don't know how to do it. So lying becomes easy. How much does it cost to come up with a lie? Absolutely nothing. You can make up lies all day long. They don't cost you anything because you're fabricating something out of nothing. So we can then deal with the underlying issue instead of the surface issue.
And I would say you could take the same thing with the concept of lying, which we would call celebration. And maybe in your world, you are a person who wants a scenario that everything is wonderful, everybody's happy. It's a good thing. You want to be on a dopamine high all the time. And so you are making this reality that is, we would call celebration, that is high intensity in celebration, that you have formulated because you want to feel good all the time. So again, it comes back to the core of this is it comes back to what's the motivation underneath this, that you're using the emotion you're using to get what you want. And it could fall within any of those categories very simply.
It can. Actually, Mike, that's a really great one, because sometimes lying is not motivated by anger or rage. It's the thrill of lying.
The thrill of lying.
Can I get away with it one more time? Yes. You know, my girlfriend wanted me home at 6 o'clock. I came home at 7:30, and I'm going to play this game until I get caught, because it's like driving my car way too fast, or jumping out of an airplane with a backpack on instead of a parachute. I mean, it's just absolutely thrilling to do it. So in the area of celebration, it could be the thrill of lying is really what's at the base.
Yeah.
Or it could be exposure. That the reason why they're lying is the truth is so frightening that a lie reduces the sense of risk or danger that I'm in. Right. So we can take any of the 5 emotions and begin exploring what's going on when an individual is a pathological liar, or maybe not pathological, just habitual. It's their habit to continue lying. We have some words that we can begin to help that person explore what the lying is doing for them. What's it doing to me, and what do I do with it? Those are the 2 key questions that we ask.
That's interesting. But a lot of it, I mean, it all comes down to understanding the brain and kind of how it works, right?
Absolutely.
Because
the brain, the soul, the mind, the history, imagination. I mean, it comes down to the complexities of what makes us human, and being able to put some language so you can talk about or think about some pretty complicated matters. The more simple the language, the more you can think about it.
So I got one for you, projection, and how you project. Like for this, I'll use this for an example. When usually I see somebody that I don't like, or somebody will come across my life and I'm like, God, that person just gets on my nerves. I can't stand them, everything about them. But when I really start looking a little bit deeper into it, what I found is like, oh, well, it's not them that I don't like. It's the behaviors that they display that I do that I don't like.
Right. And that really is looking in a mirror and seeing what you don't like, but instead of dealing with it in yourself and rejecting yourself, so to speak, you look at somebody else that displays the same behavior and reject that. And it's kind of a quasi valid way of at least addressing a personal flaw without actually dealing with it. So you can just get upset and use up the energy, at least for now, by blaming someone else or calling someone else out or whatever. It's really is reflection of yourself.
And it's understanding that, because it's, if you don't know the rules to any game that you're playing, it's going to be really difficult to win that game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It is.
Right.
And so we have a whole bunch of people that don't understand how the human brain works and why we do some of the things that we do. And once I got my head around that, and here was another one that I had learned, is that I used to, same sort of thing, but I would attack my ex-girlfriend or my daughter's mom, which is my ex, on her weight. But I struggle with weight. And so it was like, I would attack her on it. And then I'd turn around and go like, oh, there you go again. Not wanting to deal with your own self and projecting your dissatisfaction with the fact that you can't do X, Y, and Z around losing weight. And then you project it onto them.
But a good step towards health is that you recognize that critical part. When I criticize someone else for their weight issues, I'm really criticizing myself. That becomes part of gripping reality. I mean, that really is taking handle. Whether you do something with it or not is another step, because we ask two questions. What's it doing to me? What am I going to do about it? So the other part is I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to complain.
Yeah, we got a lot of those out there.
Sure. And then you just go on complaining and you're miserable and you go to bed and you're miserable tomorrow. And if you like being that way, then just be miserable. I mean, I'm not going to tell you can't be miserable, but if you want to stop being miserable all the time, then we can say, all right, you got a grip on it. Now, what do we do with it? That's the next step.
Awesome. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just one of the comments you made that you said was to win in the process, and one of the things that we really teach and we train, which is a bit, I think, might be unnerving to some people in the process, is that we use terms that, and it's not that Mike and I are not competitive. That is the furthest from the truth. But when it comes to,
we're not. I just win all the time. It's easy for me.
Yeah, I know. See, it's like, so well, I just acquiesce.
You're winning right now. You got the doctor in front of your name.
Yeah, well,
I paid a lot of money for it. No, it means nothing at all.
Absolutely nothing. But one of the things that we endeavor to do is to deal with it from a neutral standpoint, and that's not a wishy-washy kind of thing. But when we enter into conversations and we're dealing with the emotional systems, and we're dealing with the motivational systems, and we're dealing with the perceptions and those kinds of things, what we do is we endeavor to set aside our agenda. We use words that tend to be pretty neutral, that allow people to continue to explain themselves in a very real fashion, to try and help them realize where this is coming from. And I think so many times in discussions of what we're finding, particularly now in our culture, is that there's very little dialogue that's actually happening. It's a win-lose. It's my tribe, your tribe. It's us and them. And so there's very little of this give and take that's very real. There's a lot of shouting, okay? There's a lot of intensity, if you will, but there's not much understanding. And, that takes a lot of work, and it takes a bit of work on your part to sit back, to truly set your agenda aside and to hear the other person. Usually what's happening is that we're so busy with our rebuttal of what's going on and how we can actually win in this scenario that we are not hearing what people are really saying. We're not going beyond just all the bravado and all of the passion and the emotion and whatever else you want to call those things. And our goal is to help people, give them tools to move way past that, so that they can figure out.
And maybe
really
they can't move way past it. Maybe they can move a little
bit past it. We'll take that.
Maybe,
we'll take
maybe
anything.
not a lot. Maybe just a small step.
Yeah, we'll take that. We'll take anything if it's movement.
We'll take any. That's right.
Yeah. But so much of what goes on is put into that scenario, I think, of a win-loss kind of column. I'm not against win-loss. Okay, that's not the issue to me. Yeah, I think there's an appropriate time for that. But when it comes to dynamic and human interpersonal relationships, and particularly as we're trying to understand and be a civilization and be community, if we don't, I said need, if we don't push past that, okay, if we will not push past that, we're going to have a very difficult time understanding and come to any kind of working relationship that maintains any kind of dignity in people's lives. And that word is a wonderful word that we just don't have much anymore. That is the word dignity, because it drives within that the freedom to be able to be who you really are, because there's a value you've given that person that says you are important and you have real value. I want to know who you are so I can understand. That changes the whole conversation when you move into that kind of realm.
So I hear you talking a lot about words and the way that you use them, the different kind of words that we use to describe certain things. How important, in your opinion, are words, especially like the kind of words that are flying around today?
How important?
How important are
they're huge. Part of the problem, though, I think, is that there's not a common language of a common understanding of the words that are flying around out there. And so I'm left to decipher what that word means. And I may decipher it totally, because we're not in any kind of conversation. We're not in any kind of dialogue. There's no dignity left in this conversation. And so we don't even have to come to a basic understanding of what those words mean. One of the things that we endeavor to do so much in our training is to give tools we call, and their words, for people to understand, particularly within the dynamic of the emotions of intensity. So we start low, we go high in intensity, but give people real tools of what that looks like, so that they have more than just one or two, if you will, screwdrivers in the drawer, so that they are much more effective.
Let's take that and make it more practical, Mike, because you're using a metaphor that may be hard to really grab a hold of. Let's take the area of acceptance. We'll take the area of acceptance, which is, in the simplest word, love. Acceptance is about bringing something from away and bringing it towards yourself. So to have it, to consume it, to enjoy it, to have it be part of your life. That's what it means in acceptance, to draw something in from away. So Myke and I have done a tremendous amount of work with adolescents. And one of the reasons for that is if you're going to manage the world as it is, work with adults. But if you want to change the world, work with adolescents. And the reason for that is between 12 and 25 or 30, virtually all of the major life decisions, values, experiences are going to be chosen by an individual for their adult life. Their childhood is spent under their parents' care. Their adulthood is spent on their independent life, and adolescence is when they make a decision about all the various values of life. So as they move into non-family relationships, dating, experiences, intellectual, educational, sexual, economic, all those kinds of whatever the nature of relationships is. And an early adolescent, 9, 10, 12 years old, will say to another person, I like you. That's the only word they know. I mean, it's like, I really like you. How much do you like me? I really like you. I like you. I really, really like you. I like you like this. I like you. This, I like you. They don't know any other word. There's no other word because you don't want to get to the other big L word, I love you, because that's over the top. And there's only really two words that function in human relationships between two people who have an interest in one another. I like you. I love you. And then you can adjust those words a little bit. But once you get the big L word out, love, now we're in the big leagues. What other words are there? So what we begin is teaching new vocabulary to individuals so they can differentiate between liking, preferring, I desire you, I'm bonding, I'm connecting. We are profound friends. We understand, we think alike. We have a lifelong commitment. We really love each other. We're family. We're addicted to each other. We are obsessed with. Now it's getting out of control. It's getting too intense. It's beyond healthy. So we want to move our addictive behavior back to loving or devoted behavior.
No, I know exactly how that is because I'm the kind of person that doesn't like. I keep people at really, even my girlfriend, at an arm's length. You know, I don't let them in. It's something that I'm working on, but it's a hard thing to get past. But the funny thing is that like what you're explaining in the words and stuff, my daughter's going through this and she's almost 4. She's at that age where you're able to watch them, you know, learn words and they're learning things. And I'm telling her, how much do you love me? She said, I love you this much, Daddy. Right. You know, and so it's really cute, but it's also really interesting to see how the human develops.
Absolutely. And her brain is gaining vocabulary that she may not actually understand when she starts to use those words. That's one of the fun things that we have in watching adolescents learn how to swear. And they may be using words. They actually don't know what the word means. They just know it's a bad word and other people get all upset. So we would run youth events and they're connected to the church. And so there's kind of this spoken or unspoken rule against using bad language. And it's really interesting to see kids that will push against that standard just to watch how do the adults go crazy when we use the S word or the F word or GD or whatever happens to be, whatever word they want to use. And that you really have no idea what you're talking about, do you? It's so fun because instead of our overreacting to that, we'll just say, so could you say that again? Did you pronounce that correctly? I'm not sure you did. Could you say that again? And they say it again. No, one more time. Can you say that again? And Wait a minute. You're the people in charge. Why are you asking me to keep swearing? I just want to make sure you're using the word right. Do you actually know the etymology? Do you know where that comes from in Latin or Greek? And they're going, get out of here. I'm not talking to you anymore. I've had it. No, keep using the word, please. Use it as often as you can. They don't actually understand quite what the word means or how to use it. They're practicing what they think is an adult behavior by using these various kinds of words. And we can freak out and go over the top in terms of overreaction. That cements, I got him again. Look at that. My mom, my dad, my pastor, they just went crazy over that. And when you start playing the game of understanding and use of language, then it changes the experience quite a bit. And we have a lot of fun with that.
I bet. I know sometimes when I'll sit there and I'll be doing something and all of a sudden I'll just out of nowhere, I'll just be like, effing this. And then all of a sudden she's like, effing this. And I'm no. Don't say that. Your mom's going to kill me when I bring you back. If you say it, if you say that word.
The book that you held up before has the SH and then an asterisk and then a T, because the censors are going to say, you can't say the word shit in a book title. You're not allowed to. And what's interesting is she could have used the word poop, or she could have used the word crap, or she could have used the word excrement, or she could have used the word feces, or she could have used the word output, or she could have used the word dirt. But none of those words have the reaction that the S word has in good company, which creates that sellable, marketable, we're dangerous, we're at the edge, we're going to get your attention. And if she said, get your poop together, it's like, oh, that's cute. Get your dirty diaper in hand. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. Get your doo-doo. None of those work. None of them work. But when you have this edge of language, that's why language is so important. The word chosen has profoundly different meanings, not only intellectually, but emotionally. And we pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Kind of like brand marketing. Brand marketing is all about words and colors and emotion and what these different colors evoke in your emotion and all the other stuff that go with it. It's man, and it leads right back to the human psyche, right?
It does.
All back to the mind. That's great. I have one question right here. Describe your ideas of motivation and what is the fluidity variable in it?
You want to start, Mike?
Oh, God.
If you want a lateral, I can take it.
I'll lateral. Let's just start.
Okay.
I'll fill in.
Motivation is one of the four complexes that we use to teach how reality works. You have perceptions, emotions, motivations, and behaviors. Motivations are the link that tie together our emotional response or reaction to our behavior. It's what are we motivated to do? So as Mike and I, we were teaching at a college and we were trying to find a way to help both faculty and students that seem to be at loggerheads with each other and not communicating very well, how to understand motivation. And so we developed a sense that there are 5 motivational drivers. Now, it's far more complex than that. I understand that. But the 5 drivers simplified an incredibly complex aspect of human experience into a way that we could talk about it.
Right.
So the way we describe that is the most fluid, the least fixed, the most able to be changed is a conversation or words, thoughts. So we're talking about, let's just use the example of we're going to order a pizza. And so we talk about, what do you want on your pizza? That conversation can go in any direction. I want pepperoni. I hate pepperoni. How about sausage? How about anchovies? How about hot peppers? You can talk about it, and you change the toppings on the pizza easily because it's very fluid. When it goes to the next level, the second driver, we call that opinion or viewpoint. That's less fluid. It is more fixed. And a person says, no, I hate anchovies. I hate the smell of anchovies. If you put anchovies on, I'm leaving the room. This is my opinion. This is really solid for me. Now it's no longer a conversation. It's now, this is my viewpoint. We're going to get into politics in just a second. I'll let Mike take over. The third one that is more solid, more foundational, less fluid, we call values or givens. These are things that are important to me. These are values that I hold. And we put it third because sometimes values are in conflict and you have to pick which value you're going to act on. And that's sometimes difficult. So that's the one in the middle. The fourth driver is far more fixed, far more foundational, and very difficult to change. And we call that habit, or something that is ongoing that I now do without thinking about it. It's my pattern. It is, I've developed a rut. And so now I don't really think about my motivation. I do it because I've done it, and that is what I've practiced. And then the fifth one we call culture, right, or identity. And culture is the most foundational, the least fluid. So if a person says, I am Italian, they're describing their culture. So if they then say, so what are we going to have on our pizza? The Italian pizza, and they go into this long description, you're not going to change their mind because it's not just habit. You mean you always have pizza that way? No, we're Italian. We have pizza the way pizza is supposed to be made because we're the ones who have made it. And you say, no, pizza was invented in New York City. No, it was. And you go, it's culture. So now we're at a motivational. Now let's go into politics. How do you feel about Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Ooh. Talk about it. Whoa. Talk. No. Talk about it at the most fluid level. Talk about it in opinion. Talk about it in values. Talk about it in habit. Talk about it in culture. And one of the things we find is when a topic of politics arises, a person will express, I will say this is what I think, but this is all the way down at their cultural level. Right. So if I say, well, why don't you just change your mind? Why don't you become independent and vote for Bernie? Why don't you just drop out of politics all day? No, you're at a person's cultural level. And now if you want to discover their culture, that's what you talk about.
Right. And so what you see is when you think of it in those terms and that dynamic, it actually begins to make sense when you look, particularly, let's just say, it doesn't have to be politics, but we're looking at politics when people look at certain individuals. It could be politics, it could be the latest guru.
Let's take one that matters to Sean. Let's talk about incarceration. Why are there people that get out of jail and are back in jail in 3 months? Because their culture is incarceration.
Right.
It's not a value. It's not a habit. It is the culture that creates the foundation of life. And so that individual, what's it doing to you? well, I get 3 meals. I'm told what to do. I don't have to think. I wear the same clothing every single day. I know what tomorrow is going to bring. It is absolutely fixed, and I need that. So that is a culture, which is not just an opinion or a value or a viewpoint. It is now something at an entirely different level. And the fluidity has dropped down to rock solid. I understand that. To me, that's not bad. To say, poor you have to live in prison. It's not I want to consign them there. I want to discover what that person's reality is and how does it affect them. And what do they do with that? So if they say, but I don't want to live the rest of my life in prison, well, we have something to talk about. Because now it's not, what do you do to not go back to prison? It is, tell me about prison culture and how you fit into that culture. Now we can talk about something.
It goes a little bit, I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, though. I mean, I think at the base, there's that underlying thing where you know that there's safety and you don't have to think about anything and it's an easy life, right? You know, you're like you said, you're told what to do. You don't have to go and get a job. You don't have to worry about, bills and probation and
right.
all of the hoops that you got to jump through. But I don't really think that when guys get out, I mean, I think they really truly want to be out of there, and they get out and they have this idea that, you know, hey, I want to try this. I want to try and do it better this time. But there's so many different variables when guys get out. You
right.
know, do you have a support system that's going to, you know, allow you to be able to get past those hoops that you need to jump over, whether it's probation, whether it's the job, not having a car, all of these things that make things a little bit more difficult for an individual to progress further. Then you have, you know, whether or not the person is coming back to the same sort of environment, which is always going to be a huge detriment to their success, because if you come back to the same sort of cities or the same sort of other kind of cultures, the friend system, all of that's a huge detriment.
Sure. But Sean, that's what we're talking about, the fluidity scale. Because if you go back to the very same culture and you have not become different in any way, the culture is immutable. So when a person says, I don't want to go back, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous, change persons, places, and things. What's that doing is changing your culture. So to address a change of culture, not just a change of values or a change of mindset, it's a change of culture. That's extremely difficult to do for some people. Now, others, it's going to be easier, but that's the fluidity scale. At some parts of motivation are extremely fluid, some are extremely rigid, and we help people discover, where are you on that fluidity scale? That's really what it's about.
Yeah, Monica Delia Cardozo says even some go back to the same energy. And what I've noticed is when some people go back into, whether it's their family or a relationship or a loved one, you know, let's just say it's just a loved one in general that you have a toxic relationship with, you know, and you leave and then there's still, nobody's done anything to sort of mend that toxic relationship. You've got time away from each other, but the moment you get back into that same sort of scenario, the old habits just come back like that. Sure. The toxicity, boom, it's like you never even left, and here we go, we're off and running again. It's really it's back to the mind, right? It's all internal things that cause all this stuff.
So for us, habits can be changed, and it's a little easier to change a habit than to change culture. And when somebody, just as you're talking, says, you know, my habits with my ex and my friends, my habits are this, and I hear them say habits, I'm thinking we're a driver 4. We're not a driver 5, we're a driver 4. So now we can begin talking about, how does one change habits? But if I hear you talking about your identity and your culture, now we're at driver 5. Now we're going to be talking about shifting earthquake level. I mean, we got to move a tectonic plate down there. So I listen to the words that a person chooses, and I know, hey, this is going to be fairly simple. It's a conversation. These are values. This is really a habit. This is their culture. And we're on the fluidity scale, subject to change, extremely difficult to change. And we can talk about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're talking about. I definitely would be interested to hear more about this, because I'm working on a nonprofit organization right now that I've started myself for guys that are coming out of incarceration, 18 to 24-year-old males specifically, and trying to build some sort of a program for them to, whether it's a year to a year and a half, but to go through all of these sort of things. There's going to be a leadership course, which is about 10 weeks that we've already got licensed to teach in this. And this would be a fascinating one, because this is the same thing that we all dealt with. Is how to take these habits that we've learned that become sort of second nature in auto responses and whatever it is that we do, and how do we mitigate it in a way that it creates different responses to instead of reactions, you're creating responses.
Yes. Now, this might be very fortuitous for us to have this conversation with you, because Myke and I can specify the principles into virtually any human situation. So with married couples or pre-married couples or divorced couples or couples where a spouse has passed away, we can create a course that deals with these principles in that venue. Starting a business, ending a business, business conflict, a business stalemate. We can create a course that deals with that issue. First responders in fire, in police, in rescue, we could develop a course there. People coming out of prison, people still in prison, people in halfway situations. We could create a course that is specifically tailored to take principles and put them into workable structures that would directly apply to what you're trying to do.
Awesome. Now, here's something really interesting. So Monica says some are habits that will not change. So are there any habits that you can't change, or
the ones you don't want to?
The ones you don't want to, exactly. And I think that's what, I'm obviously sitting here quiet for a while here. It's fascinating when you really start delving into the motivations and seeing how culture takes over. And I think in the dynamic you'll see so many times, particularly in politics right now, where it's like people don't understand how is it you can still hang with this particular person when they've done all of these things. And it's obvious to everyone that they're less than stellar, and it's like, why would you stay with them? Well, it's culture. You have bedrocked this thing out and says it doesn't matter. I'm not changing off of that viewpoint. That's the culture in which I live in. I'm not moving to that. And so it causes a dynamic that is one that, to get past that, is incredibly difficult. But the thing you're talking about, which is the very
not
thing we talk about,
but
not impossible. It is difficult, but it is not impossible. And that's the difference. Is that I think so many times people just throw up their hands and say, well, I can't talk to you and you're never going to change, and they walk out the door on it. And yet it's not impossible. But the process comes to, do you really want to change? Do you really want to own what you're doing? In other words, what has it been doing to you, and what are you doing about it? And if it is you don't really like the life you're living, and you seem to be getting the same results, doing the same thing over and over, is expecting something different, which we all know is insanity. What we're saying is that we can help you begin to navigate that and move up the chart, if you will, in motivations that moves you more to a place of flexibility where you're understanding what is going on and then be able to take that in and think it through. So people who are at the value level, which Myke referred to earlier, which is fascinating when you watch the dynamic that happens so many times politically on the national level, you have many people who are at the value level and they buy into and they start sliding into the habits and the culture, but they still maintain a large portion of value in what they're doing. And then all of a sudden something happens that it's like they all wake up from a sleep and go, whoa. Why? Because now there's conflict in the value system that is going on, and they're looking at this and going, well, wait a minute. I hold this value and this value, but they are loggerheads. I can't live like that. And then becomes real dialogue. I mean, if people are willing to get into that, but then what do? At some point, they have to choose in that dynamic. So either they're going to slide back down into habit and culture, or they're going to move up and say, I need to rethink this. I need to pull into this viewpoints and dialogue and try and figure out what's going on. As what's happening within what I thought was a pretty solid thing, but it's not solid at all in the way that I'm looking at this. So it really does help you to understand.
So if a habit becomes deeply ingrained and a person says, I want to change this habit, but I don't know how to do that. If the solution is to have conversations, one of the campaigns that was very popular about drug use back in the 1980s was just say no. Well, that's a word. That's a conversation. The problem is you won't change a habit by a new word. You will change it by putting values in conflict, which seems a very mean thing to do at times, to walk people through value reconstruction and to put values into tension with each other as a means of breaking habit. And so changing habit can be done one stage above where that particular aspect is, not 3 stages above. So when a person says there are habits that cannot be changed, I don't believe that. If a habit can be developed, a habit can be changed.
Exactly.
And the question is, how are they changed? Just by new patterns of behavior? Maybe, but most often it is by creating values conflict. And the energy created by values conflict can change virtually any habit.
And I would say that what tails that goes right with that is community, to have that actual interaction that takes place, so that there is that rub that takes place if you are in some kind of community. I think where people say, well, I can't change. Well, are you in any kind of community that you have other orientation, that people have a whole different perspective, or is the only community people who agree with everything you think? It's like, okay, that's nice, but you're not. If you really want to change, you want to change the dynamics, you want to change the habits that you got into. You built them. Like Mike's absolutely right. You built a habit. You get out of the habit. So the question is, do you have anybody in your life that has a total different way of looking at life that can challenge you in community that is not really comfortable for you?
And realistically, most human beings do not develop their habits in isolation from all other human beings. They build habits, as Myke said, in community. And so if you want to, that's a value. I value these people.
Exactly.
These are my friends. They are important to me. What we do together accentuates and supports each other's pathways. We build habits together. So if you want to change the habit, change the people that you value. And that's a values conflict. Right. But if you change the community around you, you can change the habits that have become very deeply ingrained. Not easy, but that's the way you do it. And so it's exactly the same principle.
Yeah, I know for myself, when I started listening to podcasts, I was listening to them for, I would say, anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day on my commute home in the 8-hour shift or 10-hour shift, whichever one I was working that day. I was listening to Joe Rogan, and I was following people like Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and Lex Friedman and all of these intellects, right? And all of a sudden, because of what I'm listening to, my mindset started changing without me even realizing it.
Sure.
And everything that I was listening to, I started wanting to be a better person. I wanted to start doing X, Y, and Z. I wanted to start, showing up in a different way in my life just through what I was listening to. It was crazy. And
and the 10 friends that you grew up with that caused all kinds of habitual trouble, let's say, you devalued those friends and increased the value of people that thought differently than you did. And your change in values changed your habits. So that's exactly how it works. That's right. Precisely the method to do it.
Yeah, that's also another one too, though, this is one that's been really impactful on me, is when I see behavior that I do in somebody else and I can go, oh, wow, is that what I look like?
Yeah.
That's really, those are some of the ones that have like instantly made me change and switch everything up and go, oh, I don't want to look like that.
Sure.
So Monica, she's left already, but she said, but sometimes it's habits that don't change, meaning that's where the home is, the roof over their head, their parents, abuse, so on. Not many can make decisions like that. Something about they can't afford to make wise decisions. Unfortunately, she sees that a lot in third world countries. Yeah, well, environment plays a big part in a lot of things too. In what you can and what you can't do, and what you can and can't afford to do, and X, Y, and Z. But changing behaviors is free. I mean, you that doesn't cost money.
Sometimes.
Well, unless you want to, spend the big bucks on therapy and all the other things that go along with that, or a coaching system or whatnot.
I think that I understand what she's saying. And I think from a dynamic, if you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the way, so that's home, that's a place of security, it's a place of stability, it's a place of belonging. That alone develops culture. That alone is something that an individual, if you are about changing the dynamic in your life, you will need that ability to look at that and realize that has to change as well. And that most likely is not going to come easily. And it's certainly, I think most likely will not come out of just you, but it will come out of community where someone helps you see that. But again, it comes back to what's this doing to you and what are you going to do about it? Are you going to own that and realize that, yeah, this is a tough situation, but is that the only option I have to just keep doing the same culture I've had over and over and over? Because the result has gotten me where? Not very good results. So again, it's back to that ownership part of them realizing this really is impacting you in a profound way.
And that's self-awareness, right? Becoming self-aware. And, I think self-awareness is the key to everything, because until you become self-aware, you're just kind of, you can claim ignorance on everything that you do, right? And what's that saying? Once you know better, then you need to do better.
Yep. That's true.
All right. Well, we're at about 1 hour and 3 here. Do you want to wrap up with anything? Do some plugs for yourself and your programs. And
we are crazy people, and we have a lot of fun when we train. When we get invited in, we can do things on virtual. We can do them live. Either one of us can speak. We can do we do everything. And typically, instead of our bringing in a pre-done package, what we do is listen to the opportunity, the challenge, as described by our clients. And then we take principles and devise a practical program that applies principles into the realities of life. And so that's what we do. And with the COVID year, we've done a lot of stuff online. We started our podcast. We're writing books. I mean, we're just doing a ton of stuff. But being able to get back into the real flow of life, conversations with real people on site, live stage stuff. We do everything from main stage, main speaker down to breakouts. That's what we do. And instead of coming in with this nice pre-done, nifty package, what we do is we listen, we ask questions, we get answers, and we ask better questions, and then we'll get somewhere.
And that's really key. I mean, Myke and I have been through who knows how many hundreds of different kinds of trainings, and we really have no desire just to put something out there that is boilerplate for anybody. And we want to help people. We want to make a real difference. And so when we go into, and that's really what we enjoy the most, is when we both can be together and interacting with whatever group it is, because it's at that point that we're able to really hone in on a lot of the issues. He talked about the university that we went and spoke at. We uncovered stuff that we had no idea, but it was all because we sat down and listened. It was all because, and we literally changed in the middle of we had 3 days there. About halfway through, we realized we have to change what we're doing right now, because we want to be more effective for these folks. I think we're doing okay, we're doing well, but when we realized that there was such a huge disconnect between faculty, staff, and the student population itself at this private university, we couldn't just walk away from that and do nothing. And so that's what we try to bring. Our podcast is Gripping Reality. You can find us at grippingreality.com, as well as whypeopleactthatway.com. If you want to email us, you can email us at Myke with a Y or Myke with an I at grippingreality.com.
That's really the best way to start a conversation, is send us an email at Myke@grippingreality.com. You can spell Myke with a Y or an I. We share all the emails. We're interactive in terms of that communication, and that would start a conversation. And right. we can go from there. And we will do anything we can to assist a person in getting a grip on the reality of their situation, finding out what is it doing to me and what can I do about it. And that's really what we're about. Simple as that.
Yep.
Yeah, and what it sounds like too is that instead of doing that whole cookie cutter package that you talked about, is that you're really actually, because people in anything, we're all different.
Yes.
And so there's no one size fits all to anything in a human person.
No,
right.
Even identical twins are different. So you can't take the same, the principle is going to be universal, but the application of that principle will be unique. And
right.
that's what we're about.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your guys' time and coming on the show today and giving me a little bit of insight on some of the things that I absolutely have struggled with in the past and still struggle with today.
Yeah.
Well, privilege.
And send us an email, Sean, if there's something that we can do with your program for incarcerated guys who are really trying to change the structures of their life. And there's some things that we could do to help in that. We would absolutely adore that opportunity.
You bet. Absolutely.
Awesome. I'm going to take you up on that as well.
For real.
I'll be talking to my vice president tomorrow. We meet every Tuesday to brainstorm, because we're right at the point where we're onboarding more people onto the board of directors and sort of trying to figure out how to take this to the next level of what we need to do.
Awesome. That's a great work. That is an incredible work.
You bet. Very much needed.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys, and I will be taking you up on that offer. And love the conversation, and
Super.
we'll be following you some more. I'm gonna subscribe to your
Podcast.
YouTube channel. Yeah, you got 26 subscribers, I think, right now. So
far,
you're gonna have 20. You're gonna have 27 here pretty
27. Soon. What we're trying to do is create a background of material so that we have something to market and learn the ropes of doing this in a consistent way. So we're just getting started, and it'll be good to have you join us.
Yeah, absolutely. If you ever need any tips or tricks or any kind of help whatsoever, let me know. I've been doing this.
Take the word "if" out. When we need help, we'll call you.
For sure. I've been
not if.
I've been doing this thing for 2 years, and I do actually help produce top podcasts, edit, and all of the stuff, conceptualize, teach, all of those things. Actually, the project that I'm going to be doing here pretty at the soonest is 16 to 18 year old. It's 16 to 21 year olds. I'm going to be teaching them this. The 16 and 17 year olds are going to be separate from the 18, 19, and 20, 21 year olds. But I'm going to be teaching them how to start a podcast themselves in their community based organization, and, the whole thing with it. So I think it's really important. Podcasting really taught me what it did is it gave me my voice back, and it gave me back my dignity. It gave me back the ability to have self-esteem and confidence, and to be able to navigate through. And what really taught me how to do is how to listen in interviewing. So I appreciate everything that you guys are doing, man.
Good deal. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
All right. See ya. All right, everybody. There you go, man. That was pretty interesting. I love talking about the mind and how it kind of works, and everything that goes along with it. It's definitely one of those things that when you understand it and you understand how the mind works, it really does help you to move through things and learning how to respond intelligently instead of reacting emotionally. And that's the key right there, in my opinion. So once again, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Get Past Your Shit, the book. Kelly McCausey is the author of this book. Get her in here. Actually, let's show her name in case you didn't see it over there, wherever it is behind me. And also too, the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast was just recently, I don't know if you can see it up here in the corner, up on the top over here, for the best mental health podcast. So that was a pretty interesting and exciting thing that we did, and I was super grateful for the experience. The Scene Snobs blessed us with a snobby, their first snobby award, so that was pretty cool. And also, yeah, that's it. So stay tuned. Come back at 4:00 this afternoon Pacific time, and we'll be talking to Dan Reeves from the Spiritual Underground podcast. Until then, keep it 100. Stay true to yourself. Everything else is just noise.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at Nowhere to Go But Up Now. On Twitter at But Up Now. On the YouTube channel at Nowhere to Go But Up Podcast. See you next time.